Well, we're high up in the JM Fin stand, the City of London behind us, and the crowd streaming in for what should be another incredible day's cricket here at the Oval. Lots of juicy stories in the papers today to discuss them. Vish Athanarajah from the website CricInfo, Lawrence Booth from the Daily Mail. I got that right, didn't I? Lawrence Booth from the Daily Mail, who's editor of Wisden as well, and Butch. We're going to start with Shiel Berry and the Telegraph. Old school, no, this was simply bad batting. The run rates are very interesting, Vish, aren't they? The contrast between the teams. I asked Benedict Beaumonge this morning, and it's the biggest differential of any Ashes series ever, with England striking at 4.73 runs and over, Australia 3.33, but Australia 2-0.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, to be honest, because I think it's, people talk about a battle of ideologies. It's basically just been an argument with neither side willing to budge, and not even really a debate, because I don't think either team at any point has met the other halfway. And I quite admire that. And I mean, I wasn't saying that this time yesterday. I was, kind of wondering about if this was going to peter out as a series, but I think Australia have just got more stubborn as the series has gone on, yes. I think. And
deliberately anti-Bazball.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. But as you say, they are 2-1 up.
Bad batting, says Shiel, though, yesterday. I mean, they got level or a slender lead with England. There's two ways to play this game, aren't they? And they could perfectly well argue that by the final session, when England started to look a little bit weary, their tail-enders dipped in, and it's justified.
Yeah, I mean, in the Mail, I have to rate each session, say who's won it, who shared it. And yesterday morning, I went for shared. I thought, well, Australia have only lost one wicket in difficult conditions. England bowled really well. You could argue they went too slowly, and in the middle session, you thought maybe this has caught up with them. 5 or 6 wickets fell, and at that point, England were on top. It was only the last session that got away from them, but it feels like Australia have been trying to make a point in this test. They've doubled down on their anti-Bazball position. It took them almost twice as many overs to score 12 more runs than England. So we've seen the ideologies really sort of butt up against each other in this game, and it's what makes Test cricket so fascinating.
But is it fascinating? But I think you used the word soporific yesterday on commentary. I found it fascinating. Do you think people now are less willing to accept sessions like we saw yesterday? I mean, Shield refers to the slowest days Test cricket of all time, which came between Pakistan and Australia, when 95 runs were scored in the day in Karachi. Happened to be the only day that President Eisenhower watched cricket, and Shield says his reaction might have been the same as that of another American watching a cricket match for the first time, Groucho Marx at Lord's, when he said, "When does it start?" I mean, are people less willing now to accept slow scoring because of Bazball?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there were sessions up at Old Trafford where it seemingly nothing was going on. I mean, it was fascinating stuff, the two teams tussling and trying to gain ascendancy. Even when England batted, in fact, at Old Trafford, they went at 7 and over at one session, but they also had a period of time where they really were becalmed, setting themselves up to have a massive go. And the crowd kind of seems to switch off. And that's only because they've come to expect crash, bang, wallop every time that England take the park at the moment. I think the ends justified the means for Australia by the end of the day. They got a lead. They also kept England's bowlers out there for 100 overs. Australia might be thinking to themselves that if England played exactly the same way again, they might score 260, 280, but they'll do it so fast that their bowlers will have no time to recover from the exertions of yesterday, and that will make their job of chasing down whatever's left easier. So, look, I think they got a little bit caught because the dismissal of Labuschagne was entirely because they were sitting. They couldn't turn over the strike. Khawaja was sitting on his bat handle, which he did at Headingley, funnily enough, in the third innings when they kind of got themselves a little bit stuck. And that was what caused that dismissal and then the subsequent collapse of wickets afterwards. However, they're in front, aren't they? They're in front of the game, they're in front of the series, and they won the Ashes. And all of the hype and all of the sort of the morality of we're going to play the game in this wonderful, brave new world way will come to nothing if England end up going 3-1 down and losing the series and the Ashes as well. So look, it's very, very fascinating. Today is going to be a really red-hot day because Australia know that England are coming for them, and whatever happens, England are going to go fast here today.
Shield also talks about Ben Stokes' captaincy, that catch at the end of the day, which was incredible. He kind of puts him amongst the finest post-war captains, Illingworth, Brearley, Vaughan, Strauss. He puts Stokes in that category. Bazball sometimes gets focused in on the batting, doesn't it? The scoring rates that we've talked about. it shouldn't hide the fact that actually England's bowling under Stokes has been outstanding. They're continually taking 20 wickets in the Test match, and yesterday I thought was one of their best days with the ball.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought the thing I was most impressed with was Travis Head walks in. They've been bowling short to more series, but there was an acknowledgement of the conditions of how Broad was
Smart
going.
thinking that everybody is looking for.
Exactly, yeah. And I think if you go back to the very start of all this, baseball is essentially a philosophical, it's a coping mechanism dressed up as a philosophical ideology, whereby these are the players we have, how do we get the most out of them? We need to rid them of fear. We know they're attacking players, we know they want to go and attack. Let's let them go and attack, and let's worry about the other stuff around them. And that has been Stokes on the field with regards to how he set fields, particularly the way he's captained Jack Leach as well. The idea of Jack Leach wanting a sweeper back and him saying, no, you're not having him back, I'm going to back you. And we saw the bowler that Jack Leach became, up until his injury. And I think the fact that he has that effect on young and old as well, Stuart Broad, Stuart Broad said so himself, he only expected to play maybe 1 or 2 tests, maybe get a swan song here. And he has been remarkable because of how much more empowered he feels under Stokes. And maybe you can throw that to Anderson as well. I know we do have to take players at face value, but I think there's been a point where I've thought, maybe Anderson, he protests too much that he loves this. But then you see him smile, you see the way he's indulging in the field. He wore a bucket hat yesterday. He's a very handsome man. It doesn't suit him. I'm going to say that now. But he's bought into that, and I think there is something to be said for that.
Which among us here would it suit, Vish? Other than yourself, obviously.
I'm looking at Lawrence straight away.
That's with my hair.
You bring in Broad, he was a good thing, though. I mean, he basically lives rent-free in Australians' heads, doesn't he? Whether on the field or off it.
We will get to Stuart Broad, because Lawrence has written about him, but we're going to go to Bailgate. Bumble's verdict, and they've had to put brackets former first-class umpire here, because Bumble was, amongst many things, of course. But he says all the ex-players, almost to a man, agreed Smith was out. Do we?
Well, no, he didn't ask me. Listen,
quick snap poll: out or not out?
Not out. Yeah.
Out.
Not out.
Not out here. We've just seen them go down the rabbit hole there. Even after Ian Ward looked at all the replays for about 50 minutes last night, there's still not a conformity of opinion in the commentary box, at least.
And therefore, not out's the right call, isn't it? And I actually think that Nitin Menon got to the right decision last night, perhaps erroneously, but in the end the decision was correct anyway. Given the evidence that he had at the time, it was the only call that he could make. And I think after all that we've looked at, I think he still came to the right one.
Amongst us all, then, you're the only one who thinks it's out. Why do you think it was out?
We were debating just off air about whether that off bail is out of its offside groove before Johnny dislodges the bail with the stumps of his gloves, dislodges that one. Does he then, with the ball in his gloves, dislodge the middle stump side of the off bail? That's the question. I think without zing bails, it's almost impossible to tell. There was an angle where the middle stump is bending backwards and the bat isn't in the crease, and at that point you think, well, the bail is not in its crease. Now Butch will say that it was already out of the off stump side. I mean, it's complicated.
It was higher than when you see it from side on. It was higher than the one that is definitely sitting in both grooves. I mean,
I don't think it was a bad decision. It's not a shocker, but it was an important decision, and I think it's symptomatic of this series that it could boil down to something as tight as that.
Yes, the margins are fine.
Because they would have been 190 odd for 8, 90 behind England. Cummins played himself in with Smith at the other end. Now, had Smith fallen, then Australia could have been 210 all out. You back England then to win that game. So it sums up this series really.
Do you think in the age of DRS, people are now less willing to accept that error, flaw, luck, good luck and bad is part of the game, part of cricket, always has been and always will be to some extent?
Well, I suppose when you've got the technology, people just assume that, right, that should be 100% accurate. And I suppose, we do have that technology, but it's still a human being, punching all the buttons and coming to a decision at the end, I feel like we were getting out of this with VAR chat moving into cricket, but here we are. And I think one of the things cricket has been better at football has been actually the retweaking of the laws to make them more workable with technology. I think there's still a long way to go, but I feel like we just, because of the nature of the game, we stumble upon these quirks of law and even language at times so often. I mean, usually when a keeper dislodges a bail, they've properly taken them out. It was just the subtlety of Bairstow's mistake, I suppose. that leads us down this path. I don't think it's unreasonable for a fan to think we should get it right. I don't think it's unreasonable that us sitting around the table should
have a debate about it.
Yeah, should have a debate about it. But also, could it be clearer? Yes. Will it be clearer? Probably not.
But it struck me at the end of the Old Trafford test, for example, rain has always been a part of cricket, probably always will be. I heard some bonkers theories about, let's put stadiums on, roofs on the stadiums, let's play till 11 o'clock at night. I mean, it's just luck, isn't it? It's part of life.
It just fed into the stereotype of whinging Poms, didn't it? And the Aussies leapt on it. It was a shame in a way, because the story was that Australia got away with one there, not that England should have been moaning about it. It was just bad luck.
The worst thing about all of this from yesterday for me is that poor old George Elam, who should be written into Ashes folklore along with Gary Pratt and with Ricky having a thrombosis in the commentary box instead of out on the pitch, has now kind of been wiped out of it, because the piece of fielding that led up to the incident was absolutely electric.
Well, I was just saying off there, I first saw George Elam play for Kent's under-10s at the Polo Farm down in Canterbury, so lovely to see him kind of make an impact there. And Mark texted me yesterday to say his granddad Alan, who's one of the great fielders in county cricket, was watching the coverage avidly and would have been a very proud grandfather, I'm sure. Right, to your piece, Lawrence. Broad makes mischiefs. One thing is for sure, Stuart Broad will not be voiding these Ashes. He would not be allowed to, even if he tried, because most of the highlights reels have had him somewhere in shot, smiling, whooping, gurning, generally causing mischief. He's had a great series.
It's amazing. He's transcended cricket, hasn't he? Every time something has happened,
thinks he has.
He's been there in his bucket hat, winding up the Aussies. This is a kind of series made for him. I mean, he was dropped in the Caribbean last year. He thought his career was over. So did Jimmy Anderson.
His career would have been over had he gone to the Caribbean.
Yeah, might have been actually. All right.
On those pictures.
His career
it saved his career.
His career was saved. Baz and Ben come in. They come and have some fun with us, and he has risen to the occasion. He's the leading wicket taker in this series at the age of 37. He's got 20 wickets. He's been at the centre of most things. He's readjusting the bails yesterday, the ball before Labuschagne gets out. I mean, the two things are totally unconnected, and yet somehow Broad in his press conference manages to sort of create a link between them. You think, maybe he really is a magician. What is going on here? So Stuart Broad has been absolutely
Uri Geller of cricket. I mean, should Broad be doing that, though? If I'm a batsman, this is my area, this is my wicket, I'm protecting my wicket. Stay out of there. It's nothing to do with you.
Yeah, but Stuart Broad is exactly the type of person who would walk into your kitchen and open your fridge, wouldn't it? So that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, just to riff off what Lawrence was saying, I just find him remarkable, really. This series has been not even punctuated, but probably kind of flooded with too many people saying too many things. And Stuart Broad has spoken the most. We spoke to him for 3 different sponsors events in the 2 months leading up to this series. He said the most words. And he's backed every single one of them up.
Yes.
Right down to, dabbling in the dark arts out there. It's honestly been a joy to watch him, and you kind of want him to keep going. The game is always interesting when he's playing, and you kind of think to a time when he's not, and that's the inherent sadness. He brings in so many people to the game, even just people who like the nonsense, really. And, as Lawrence said, he's had a brilliant summer.
Some tricky decisions coming, though, for both him and Anderson. Me and you really didn't have to make those decisions because injury really made the decisions for us. But it is not an easy thing, is it, to know exactly the right time to bow out?
No, it's not. And I kind of think back to your final Test match here at the Oval. It was the most undemonstrative wandering off into the distance that I've ever seen. You just kind of shrugged. McGrath nicked you off again. You just shrugged and kind of walked off, and that was it. There was no histrionics at all. Jimmy spoke to us last night at the cart at the end of the show, and he was sort of pretty happy with how it's gone. He sort of said, this is how it goes. I've been in the game for long enough to know that you don't always take the wickets. You don't always kind of get all the headlines. And of course, because of he is the age that he is, people will talk about retirement. People will look forward to the winter in India and pitches that might be just as much kryptonite to him as Edgbaston was at the beginning of the season, and think, is it time for England to move on? As far as he's concerned, he wants to keep going. And England, I don't think, are going to pull the plug on the great man.
Even he and Anderson and Broad might not make the Olympics in 2028. But there's a nice yarn here from Ali Martin and Sean Ingle in The Guardian. Cricket likely to return to the Olympics at the LA Games. For the first time since 1900, I think, LA Games is 2028. Cricket in the Olympics discussed, good or bad?
Good. I suppose it depends. There are quite a few hoops to jump through when it comes to being an Olympic sport, and not necessarily the format. I mean, that's probably something that us as cricket writers will discuss, will it be a T20? Is it right to be a T20? Could it be a T10 even, in terms of condensing it into that Olympic schedule? Obviously, some sports spill over on either side, but generally in that 2 weeks. I think there are also little things like when it comes to testing, that's actually quite a big jump because there is no universal standard within cricket itself. They'd have to sign up to essentially Olympic drug testing, which in itself will, maybe in a good way, filter down and have us looking at our own regulations in that regard. I think fundamentally, though, it is a good thing.
I mean, for both sets, for cricket, obviously it brings globalisation and a broader reach, and for the Olympic organisation, the kind of holy grail of India, getting really involved in the thing.
I mean, India's always been the stumbling block here. They haven't wanted to relinquish control of their players to the Indian Olympic Committee. There is rivalry apparently between the BCCI and the Indian Olympic Committee. I mean, I remember years ago we were doing a press conference in Dubai. Dave Richardson was the ICC chief exec, and he said to me as we were leaving, he said, "Would you go for the Olympics?" I was like, it's a no-brainer because it unlocks so much government funding. This is free money for the ICC. We talk about investing in the smaller countries. Well, the governments will do it if cricket is an Olympic sport. So from that position alone, it's thumbs up.
But presumably that's a summer competition in LA, and there's a big piece in the FT about Major League Cricket, the final of which is this Sunday between Seattle, I think, and MI New York, and it's going to put severe pressure on the English summer and the scheduling around it.
Yeah, and we kind of saw this coming. I don't know if it was you or Nasser sat down with Richard Thompson just after he took over while you guys were in Pakistan, talking about sort of the preeminence of the Northern Hemisphere summer and how we have to make sure that we own that space with cricket in this country. And of course, whilst he was saying that, I was sitting there thinking, well, isn't there an American tournament starting next year? And
yes.
That, because of the fact that there is Indian and South Asian money involved in that is going to be very lucrative. And the players have already decided to look over there and go that way instead of staying behind for the 100, which is not lucrative, not in sort of relative terms to tournaments like that. So if that kicks off and that goes well, then we're going to have an exodus of our best and brightest white ball players that are going to want to be involved in that and not be involved here in England, and that's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're running out of time really, but in the US they say 5.4 million South Asians living there. Cricket participation is high. Morrisville area, where this Major League Cricket has been happening, but already boasts more than 60 teams and 3,000 active players. So maybe cricket will finally crack America. Have you watched any Major League Cricket?
I have, and I'll be honest. Well, yes, and I think you see it as a quite prominent threat to the English summer because, you look at the teams and a lot of those players aren't playing anywhere else. There's not being dragged any other way. And you see a lot of the English eyes looking that way as well. And it's been pretty decent, yeah.
Have you seen it?
I'm slightly distracted by
by
this stuff.